Hi, my name is Teresa Foster, and this is my video response to submission for needs and challenges of a disaster. During the heroic phase, both the responding teams and volunteers and survivors are dealing with their own response to the disaster. For survivors, they may experience denial and severity of the impact on themselves, such as psychological, emotional, and even spiritual. They may experience denial of impact on their families, community, and even their homes. Survivors are likely still in short-term survivor mode, trying to make it to the next day, but not thinking or planning for long-term. As for the response teams and volunteers, there is an increased need of self-care as they exert much energy and time in helping those impacted. I think this can also apply to the survivors, hence their strong denial. The exhaustion of reality can be overwhelming. Therefore, denial may alleviate this. However, self-care is essential for them as well to help counteract debilitating denial while providing them the confidence, energy, and motivation needed to progress forward. The video mentions Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where after basic needs are met, then more complex issues can be addressed, such as psychological and emotional. However, the survivor must realize, understand, and accept the reality of those basic needs being jeopardized or even destroyed, and therefore the increased need and importance of rebuilding anew. The honeymoon phase consists of survivors beginning to establish a sense of hope. There are more hope and inspiring stories formulating, and survivors have a greater sense of gratitude of efforts being done on their behalf. However, for others, there is a crash point that can occur during this stage. For example, as the video mentioned during Hurricane Katrina, the elderly, disabled, and kids were the most at-risk population for psychological and physical ailments. During this phase, those physically impacted began to experience increased physical and health issues, such as heart attacks and high blood pressure. This reminds me of the crisis of COVID-19, where the same at-risk populations, seniors, kids, and the disabled, were the most at-risk vulnerable populations. As the crisis began to die down, these groups began to experience more severe health issues in response to surviving the virus, such as COPD, reduced lung capacity, and severe lung scarring affecting breathing. This put them at risk and weakens their immune system for future viruses, such as the common cold and the flu, which shows that the impact that we experience during trauma and disaster and crisis are not one-time fixes that proceed forward and we can move on. There are other lingering effects, which brings us to the disillusionment phase. This phase can bring in feelings of anger and fear and hopelessness as the reality of the impact begins to set in. There appears to be a greater gap between the point of rebuilding and restoring normalcy and hope. The implementation of psychological first aid, or PFA, has the capacity of reducing the likelihood of more serious long-term mental health conditions. In result of trauma, Clinical mental health diagnoses such as PTSD and anxiety and depression are most commonly diagnosed. Along with the increase in suicide, addiction, and violence can be seen as shared by the video. Treatments for these conditions are to be trauma and PTSD focused, such as EMDR, which reduces or eliminates the negative effect associated with traumatic memory tied to the crisis or disaster, enabling reprocessing of the memory. EMDR has been tested and researched as being highly effective for treating PTSD and result of trauma. Another beneficial treatment method includes encouraging community versus isolation, such as group counseling and small group sessions. After a traumatic event or disaster, it is common for individuals to internalize and isolate themselves from other individuals and their normal setting. By engaging in group counseling or small group sessions in church settings, which implements a spiritual component, they are now surrounding themselves with other individuals who are either experiencing the same disaster, seeking the same type of recovery, or some that are individuals with similar disasters and seeking recovery. They are able to express themselves differently, and they're able to share what they have been feeling and going through alone. They're able to get more information on how to cope. It is also common for those who have isolated themselves to start to engage in more maladaptive behaviors. By being in group counseling, they're able to get other perspectives and other ideas that are more healthy on how to cope and move forward, while possibly getting a hold of some long-term friendships or more healthy relationships. And then there is treatment that is resilient building, such as previously mentioned, religious and spiritual cognitive behavioral therapy. For those who are willing, which has been reported to reducing depression and PTSD symptoms. In the video, it was mentioned that individuals after the disaster, there was an increase in spiritual interest. Individuals were seeking either a means for hope or a means for trying to make sense of what happened. And so there was an increase in spiritual guidance and wanting to feel a part of something and understanding the purpose and how all of this falls into a bigger meaning. Incorporating religious and spiritual components in treatment is a great option for those who are willing or who has strong spiritual religious backgrounds, as to build resilience and increase optimism. The stages of disaster looks different for everyone, including the city or community as a whole, regarding length, recovery, and response to the disaster. Studies have shown that community resources are essential for post-traumatic growth, even a year and a half after the disaster. So with recovery time looking different for each individual, the best response for addressing survivors of a disaster, traumatic event, or crisis is not only preparation, but also increasing their access to resources post-disaster and making sure that those resources are always available for them. I have provided links to my resources used in this video in the comment section below. Thank you.